Hello again, Patrick here. I'm going to now show you how to load an old 120 Kodak camera. This is a fairly old one, so it's a little bit different than some. The camera and lens portion comes out of the body, which is just basically a case, and that holds the film, and then you put the camera back on top of the film, where most of the ones that you're going to come across open, split in half, and it's a little bit more like what you'd be familiar with if you ever loaded a 35mm camera. Although there's no cartridge, the back opens, you put it in, close the back. So this one's a little bit different than that. So yours may be a little easier to load than this one will be. So I've got here a roll of Ilford Delta 100 black and white film, which is a paper-backed film. It'll go in here, and it's on a spool, so you got to be a little careful with this. It comes in a little pouch, and if you get some of this, you can buy it online, you can buy it here in town. I got this at a local big camera store. I'm not going to name them because, well, they're not paying me for this, so they can stay anonymous. But if you buy some of this, a lot of times it's a good idea to buy 5-6 rolls if you think you're going to do this again, because it gets a little scarce sometimes. It's hard to come by. And this was like $5 a roll, so we got developing costs as well, so it's getting a little pricey. Some of the other sizes of film, if you find one, there's a film size called 620. If you come across 620, buy every roll you can, put it in your freezer. It'll probably last for 5 or 10 years, but you may actually be able to resell it sometime later, but it's quite valuable to get hold of because nobody manufactures the stuff, or it's very limited in manufacture. After the 1990s, it was real hard to get, and I understand in Serbia they were making some film for a while and they didn't even realize how valuable it was. They were selling it for like $1 a roll, but they've stopped making it as well. So if you find that stuff, the real weird sizes, if it's not expired film, it's worth grabbing hold of. So first thing I'm gonna do is I've cleaned this camera real well. I've gotten in, make sure it operates. I've checked it for light leaks, and that's in another film or another video that I made of checking for light leaks to make sure that I'm not going to waste my money on this film, because you know, once you expose this thing, the film's always there. If you leave the lens open or the bellows open for any length of time, you know, if you've got a light leak, it's just going to ruin the film. It's going to be all hazy, foggy at the very best, and at the very worst, it's completely overexposed and nothing there. So, okay, this particular one opens by sliding this little catch over, and it lifts out just like this. It's kind of snug, and then pull it this way. All right, so this we're just going to set aside for a minute because I don't need that right now. Now, when you load these, there's a receiver end and a feed end. Now, this particular one, the feed end, a lot of the later cameras will have a knob here so that the spool rides on it. This one just kind of rides free. It just sits down in there. You're going to set that film down inside here. And we pull out the winding knob right here, or winding key as they call it. We just pull this out, and it's going to loosen up, and I can drop out the spool. Always keep these spools, and when you get your film developed, request to get the spools back, because these things get harder and harder to find all the time. There's one that comes on this, and it's probably plastic. These metal ones are better for a take-up reel. Some of them have a smaller slit here and a wider slit here, so you'll feed the paper through here and then out this side. And then once we put it inside, then you'll see this winder can only go one direction. That's all. It won't let you go backwards. So once that's in place, you won't make any errors. So now what I'm going to do, because this film, when you're loading this, it's subject to light contamination. That's just all there is to it. The only thing that keeps this film from exposing to light is a sheet of paper that's riding next to it. It's not glued to or attached to it. It's just right there next to it, sandwiched together on the back of the film to prevent it from exposing. And the ends of this spool and that piece of paper are all that are keeping light from getting to this. So you kind of want to minimize light because there's a chance you'll get some. There's a really long leader on these things, so you don't have to worry that the film is right there and you're going to expose it. I mean, as a matter of fact, it's kind of ridiculous when you start winding it. You're going, when am I going to get to the numbers? You wait till the little numbers show in the window that's on the back. There's a little arrow, there's a little hand pointing. Then you finally get to the point that there's film, but there's a good long leader before you get to that, just to protect you for that reason. So I'm going to dim the blinds, or dim the light here by closing my blinds some. So this is going to get a little bit darker. Okay. And don't really have to turn the light down, but I'm just trying to make a point. You want to have it a little bit darker when you're doing this. So I opened the box earlier, so I just use a little bit of tape on it. This is how it comes. Here's your little package of film. It's a little foil pouch. Not that it makes any difference. I've always liked to snip the end off of this and slide it back in when I'm done, because it's just one more protection for light when I send it to lab, wherever I get it. You know, there's places in town that'll develop this as well, and you can do it online, sometimes a little bit less expensive. So I'm gonna have to go to the glasses because it is a little darker in here. So let's set that off. And then if I get it. Okay. So here's what you've got. It's going to say unexposed on here. Once you go to the other end, there's another tab on the other end of this that's going to say exposed, so it's really easy to tell them apart. Not that you're going to do tons and tons of this, but there's a little tab to help you open this thing up. And you can take this off of here. Now, obviously the film is going to lay in this way here. It's going to sit in this little receptacle on the bottom. Yours may have the tab that's similar to this that pulls out, so it'll slide back in this hole. This one, as I say, ride-free. It's an older version. So here's some of the paper. I just try to keep it tight if I can, keep my finger on it. So you've got the tab, which is pretty obvious. It'll go through the large side and into the small side. I'm not sure you can see that, but it'll be apparent here in a second. So hold that tight, slide this guy through, and get it in there. And there we go. Okay, so since it's going to roll that way, I'm just going to wrap it a little bit. Get a little bit of that slack out of there. And make sure it's riding inside the film. So, okay. Gonna, whoops. Slide that down in the back's where it would be, and if yours has that tab, it would be, you'd put it in there. So I'm gonna put this in. So I'll line that up, and now what I've got is I have this little key has to go down in the hole. Oops, it's giving me a little bit of a hard time here. There we go. There, now, that's seated in place. This is closed down. Now the winding spool is ready. So now my film is set. Take this guy. We're gonna, around the middle of the camera for this particular version, some of you may have it a lot easier. Slide that like this here, drop it down. Now, it's loaded, so I'm going to turn the lights back up a little bit so I don't have to worry about that anymore. Set that junk aside. So I have covered the little, what would you call it, the little window that's on the back of this with some tape, because this older camera didn't have the little slider that closed, and I've showed that on a different video. Matter of fact, I've got a camera right here. Some of them will have a little door that opens, which they discovered after a while that these things just get light leaks like crazy. So this one, I took a piece of cardboard and used some painter's tape. You could use gaffer's tape because I'm sure that's dark enough, just as an extra precaution with a little tab on it so I can see what I'm doing. But right now, I need to open that because I'm going to start winding and loading the film. So as we go, just keep winding. You won't see anything. The little window there, all you can see is the paper on the back. You can see it looks kind of yellowish. And see the arrow? That means that's start. That's where we're starting this. It's a little confusing at first. You might think that's where you take your first picture. That's not the case. You wait until you get to a number. There's going to be a bunch of dots that get larger and larger and larger as they go. So let me see what I'm doing here. I'm not sure if you can see it. Just keep on going. Okay, there's dots. You can't see them, they're down towards, there's a little arrow down there, maybe you can see it, but, oh, there you go, there's another arrow. They have arrows in different places because different cameras have their windows in different spots. Okay, there's 1, 2, 3 of getting closer. It's got the Ilford, and there's number 1. So we're ready to take a photo right now. This camera is ready to go and ready to take shots. So I'm going to make another film outside. You can use these inside, and you have to use your number 1 diaphragm and do your settings as best you can. And sometimes, frankly, if you're taking an inside shot, you can make people sit still for a long time. Or if you're subject, if it's a still life, you can use the bulb feature or the time feature, and just you click the shutter once to open it, have a stopwatch or a clock, and you estimate your length of exposure, and then close it again. So you can take long exposures, but it's not going to do it for you. It's old school. You've got to time it yourself, and it's a bit of hit or miss. So you might want to try a couple different ones. But outside, you'll want to use the smallest diaphragm if it's a real sunny day, and the quickest shutter. And they call it instantaneous in the book, which is actually in current context kind of ridiculous. It's called it instantaneous because this is far from instantaneous. Taking a picture with this 90 years ago, they just didn't develop film. They didn't develop film at drugstores or anything back then. If you had your own setup, you could do it that same day perhaps, but most of the times you drop it in a prepaid envelope, send it off to Kodak, and 2 weeks later you get your film back. Of course, that wouldn't fly nowadays. I mean, everyone's got to be truly instantaneous. But most places, if you take it to places here in town, you can actually get it developed within 3 hours if you really were that motivated to get it done. But at any rate, I'm going to go outside here in just a moment and take some pictures.